She is your activities day and checking out what's
It's always cold down there.
She's pretty good about all that.
Yeah, she got it.
Okay.
It's like,
Not much. Like, oh girl, you need to watch your parents die. Said I came to work. Yeah, all we ask is that you can see the screen. I'm one of those people that has to sit right there because I can't read anything. We're just happy to be inside where it's warm. This might last like 5 hours. So we don't want to come back out.
well, you're going to be here at 2 hours on the couch.
I go to bed at 8 o'clock, so we're good. If I see the 9 o'clock, I worked third shift for many years, so now I like appreciate sleep. So if I see the 9 o'clock news, it's a great day.
Are you doing great? Sit with us? Give me the clicker.
We do.
This was not the church that I was thinking of.
Yeah, we did a walk through here. And the PD was literally a walk over.
I was worried for us.
That was funny. I feel bad that that guy had no clue who we were. Yeah, we just about to start training.
Arch.
No, I would call them and see if they have questions. Okay, I would do that. Yep. Yep. Bye. Yeah, I couldn't find these. I gotta get more turns.
Isn't it nice to have a little?
Oh, this is great. The radio's going, no. So we'll give it a couple more minutes. How many of you, just, I like to know who's in the audience, are ushers? Okay. Do you have greeters also, or is that the same? Okay. And then are you members? How many of you have been through an active shooter seminar before? We were just sharing with them, and we'll give some background on who we are. We do a lot of training in corporate and factories and businesses, and now our younger kids come in and it's been their world at school. Like they're used to it. Yeah. So it's been really an interesting shift in the last 6 years, 5 years. Yeah. Are you still at the forest schools? Okay. 3 years ago. Okay. Yeah, and our school drills, like we're all there now. We try to get to as many schools and help each other out, and it's changed quite a bit. But. All right, we are at 6 o'clock. I'm really good about making sure we're done on time. She'll just keep you here and talk forever, so I'll watch this.
You know what's funny? When I was a kid in school, I was so shy. If somebody talked to me, I think I would have fallen on the floor and just balled myself up in a fetal position. And at some point, after being in this line of work, something just snapped. And I will literally talk to anybody now. It's like, avoid me sometimes. Yeah.
Thank you for having us, thank you for setting this up. My name is Jocelyn Longley, I'm a deputy, we're with the Dane County Sheriff's Office. I've been with the Dane County Sheriff's Office for 25 years, and I've been working in this role of emergency preparedness for 10 years, which is crazy, because I remember the day they told me to start this, I was like, what am I doing? And I hate that I had to get pulled from my position to do this, but I will tell you, being out in our communities, talking about this, preparing people, looking at buildings, how we can harden them, it's a passion of mine. So thank you for having us again. We trained about 38,000 people here in our county on this topic. We'll talk about previous events. I can tell you personally, I was involved with 3 of the active shooters that we did have in our county, and there's things that we can learn from it that hopefully we never have to use, but we'll talk about. I've been a negotiator on the Dane County SWAT team since 2013, so about 13 years. So that's allowed me to attend a lot of the briefings on these topics that we'll reference. So, thank you.
I'm Cindy. I worked for Dane County for about 26 years. I worked for the Capitol Police for about a year before that. And I'm actually a transplant to Wisconsin from Oklahoma. I'm not even going to talk about how that happened. But, I've been here longer than I've been anywhere. So I consider this my home now. I retired 9 years ago. In 2017, and had an opportunity to come back and work with Jocelyn. And actually, she talked about her being a negotiator. I was on the phone with her unsupervised, and next thing I knew, I was back at work. So don't have a one-on-one conversation because you don't know where you're going to end up being.
And don't retire in the middle of winter because you get bored fast.
Exactly. That happened. I was calling her like, I was just watching Dr. Phil. She goes, I'm going to crash outside. What do you want? So a couple things going into this. First of all, we just want to let everybody know we get that this is a really, really difficult subject to talk about, to think about, to plan for. And we aren't going to show you anything graphic, nobody getting shot, nothing like that. But just the nature of what it is that we're here to talk about tonight can invoke a lot of feelings and thoughts. And some of those feelings are really hard to process and work through. So if you start to get overwhelmed by emotion, you do whatever you need to do to manage that or to take care of yourself. The other thing I want to say is that we're going to spend a couple hours with you this evening. This should not be the end of your education on this. We'll give you a lot of information. We're going to give you a lot of things to consider and think about. But it's on you then to take it and continue this journey after we leave. We will be here as a resource. We will give you a lot of stuff that you can research and look at on your own. But if you're here just to check a box, I'm telling you right now, this is not what this is about. This is about action. This is about doing something. So we expect that you're going to take this and continue with it. The other thing I want to say is that we are not here to tell you what to do. We are here to share the information and the experience and the training that we've had. And take it for whatever it's worth for you. If you want to do things, great. If you don't want to do things, that's also fine. But we want to share best practices. We want to share you things that we've learned and things that other people have learned.
And just going off that, if at any time you need to step out during this, please do so. This is a hard topic to talk about. Especially most recently, we just had the 1-year mark from Abundant Life. And we found that we've had a lot of people that are somehow related or affiliated to that. So just take care of yourselves.
We have been here so many times before, more than 100 times over the last 20 years. After a deadly pandemic year, the country is again facing an enemy within, gun violence and mass murder. Breaking news tonight, the deadly New Year's truck attack in New Orleans being investigated by the FBI as an act of
say, if this were to happen, or chances of this happening pretty slim, I don't need to deal with it. This is a very low probability event, but it is a very high risk event. So even if you're gonna go through your life and never have to experience this, if it does happen, when it does happen, where it does happen, what happens after is so impactful that we have to prepare for this. We can't rely on, "Hey, we'll figure it out in a moment," because I guarantee you that's not going to happen. We also use the term empowerment. We want to empower you to participate in your own survival, to do something before law enforcement, first responders get on scene that's going to increase your chance of surviving when this type of event happens. So again, we want you to take the information, you can take pictures of slides if you'd like, take notes if you'd like, but we want you to take this now after we leave and do something with it.
All right, so just a couple housekeeping. I just updated this PowerPoint last week, so this is honestly 4 hours worth of content. We're not gonna keep you here for 4 hours because my bedtime's 8 o'clock. So we'll have the 2 hours. We're gonna try to save questions. This is a smaller group, so I would say if you have a question, just throw it out there, and if we know it's something we're gonna cover, we'll just tell you to hold on to it. There are some QR codes in here. We got techie, which is pretty fancy for 2 cops. And a 10-year-old show us how to make QR codes. So we do have some QR codes in here, but last week I actually made a resource sheet that has links and QR codes that we will send you also. So we want to leave you with a lot of information. So maybe some good things in there. We're not going to take a break, so if you need to use the restroom, take a call. Come on.
So what's interesting about these types of incidents, there is always something that happens that's unique to that specific type of event. So we don't want to play the what if game. So for example, you can say, well, okay, what if this particular thing happened here in our setting? Tell us exactly what we're going to do. I would love to be able to do that. I would absolutely love to be able to do that. The problem is we can't account for every potential variable. So this is about being flexible. This is about giving yourself options and doing what you can do personally to prepare. Right? We want to define what an active assailant is for our purposes this evening. And that is a person who's attempting to kill or killing as many people as possible in a confined and or populated area in the shortest amount of time. Why we don't say active shooter is because these events involve more than just firearms. Sometimes guns aren't even a part of it. So we've taken that and now we approach it differently by saying active assailant, active attacker, active threat, something like that. What other types of weapons are we seeing? Well, we saw in that video a year ago, New Year's Eve. There was an attack on, down on, what am I trying to
New
say?
Year's Day right on
I keep wanting to say something else, and I know that's not right. Bourbon Street, there we go. So on Bourbon Street, there was a vehicle attack. Started out that way, turned into a chase, turned into a gunfight. They found explosive devices afterwards that were planted up and down there. We've had our own vehicle attack, most notably the lock shop raiding that occurred. We also know as weapons have been used. So this is an image from an attack that happened at a Walmart in a different state, where an individual had a knife, didn't have a gun or anything else, perpetrating an attack. This was extremely interesting to us. This was the attack at the Mormon church in Michigan. So this particular individual utilized a vehicle, utilized a firearm, utilized explosive devices, and utilized fire. So an hour before this occurred, we were doing a training. And we had the question, hey, has anybody ever shot starting from the outside in? And that hadn't happened yet. So I think he actually did that here, and there was another incident where shooting started from the outside as well. Explosives, so the percentage of incidents of somewhere between 3 and 4%, so pretty low. However, they have found these devices in many more that either didn't go off, they failed, or they didn't have time to set them off or something like that. So pretty common in these cases. Cyber attacks. If I say to you, you know, we need to be prepared for some sort of cyber attack, what do you envision in your mind that looking like? What are people typically after when they're hacking into your computer system? Money. The bottom line is they're looking how to get a hold of finances or something like that. But I push people a little bit further. There are also folks out there that will try to hack into your database to get other information like what does your floor plan look like? What do your security measures look like? What do your emergency operating procedures look like? So they're trying to gain information that's going to help them be successful when they decide to perpetrate these attacks. Drones. So another interesting piece to this. Other countries have been dealing with, in warfare, things like that, drone strikes. So most notably, I talk about Russia and Ukraine. They've utilized that on both sides, right? We have not had a true drone attack in our country so far, but what we have had, outdoor venues, drones being used to drop weapons and controlled substances in those crowds. Most notably, fentanyl, which if you know anything about that substance, extremely dangerous. So it's only a matter of time, unfortunately, I feel like, that we might see these utilized.
And I don't want to be here to put, the fear of you ever ringo, but I will tell you, I worked at the Luke Bryan concerts, if anyone went, it was like in the middle of a cornfield. Whose dumb idea was that? Bunch of drunk people in a cornfield, but we use drones as counter surveillance. So we had drones up over the crowd. I'm not a drone operator, but they did, and we could see then if we had a medical incident or we had a fight. It was really helpful for us. So you will see, I've been at like Friday night football games or Badger games. They're using drones also for surveillance to keep you safe.
All right, so question for all of you, as you see this pop up, how many of you have been to one or more of these places?
One sticks right out there.
You can get past bars, that's right.
Oh, my goodness.
He stopped right there.
What else do you need to know, right? So, this is a lot of different environments, and unfortunately, these are all places where there have been documented attacks, like we're talking about this evening. And we could probably add some locations to this. The reason that we bring this up is because we want you to think about this as a life skill. So great, in this setting, what do we do when we're here to worship, to be spiritually fed, things like that. But you are in other locations as you conduct your life. So restaurants, concerts, movies, sporting events, things like that, where we know these have happened. So we want you to use the information here, obviously, but also how can you apply this to your own personal life? So we'll talk about ways to respond, ways to increase your survivability. But before we do that, we want to talk about things that you can do before anything happens to make it a harder target or environment to access, also make it less desirable to access. And we use the term left of the bang to talk about that.
Do you host any outdoor events as like here on site, or are you at a park, or, okay. And I'm happy to come back in the summer and I can join one of the Windsor deputies because you guys contract with the sheriff's office with 4 deputies that work with her, which is crazy, I think now. Like, your population during a workday is almost as big as Madison, I feel, with all the businesses. ways to keep your event safe, and I'm just gonna go through some of them, but again, I'm happy to be a resource for you. All right, so we had some conversation, and this is gonna give people heartburn, but we're just gonna have some honest conversations here, and then what you all decide to do and talk about after we leave is up to you. Access control in our churches, I would say in the last, probably at least the Sutherland Springs, probably the last 5 to 6 years has been a hot topic. Do we lock our doors? Do we not lock our doors? Do we have one door unlocked? Do we have all doors unlocked? We can't come in here and tell you what to do. But I will tell you, one of our federal partners that we work with will oftentimes go into a building and they'll say, well, we're concerned because mobility issues, we don't really have anywhere for people to run or they can't run. And we have all of our kids down here in this area. And his answer is, then you make this Fort Knox. You make it harder to get in. And I'll talk about how other ways to still make people feel welcome. And this has been a hot topic, but I'll share the trends we're seeing. So, I'm going to share this video. This is from the Annunciation shooting that occurred up in Minneapolis it was August, I believe. We were actually doing a school training the day this happened. I want you to think of that access control and people accessing your building. See, it's almost my bedtime. Getting into your building as you watch this.
It looks grim in that moment. There are not words to describe the unthinkable happening to children. And we were very, very concerned that additional children were going to die. But it's clear now that we know the church actually had a procedure in place that once the mass began, they locked the doors to the building. And we believe this likely saved additional lives.
I just want you to sit on that and think of that as we talk this through. So again, trends that we're seeing is is your main parking lot over here, you get people that park on the south side? Okay, and really you guys have 2 doors?
Right.
Yeah. So for you guys, and there's a lot of places where they have 8 doors and they're all open. And I challenge them and say, if you suddenly were to get information that there's someone out in that room with a gun and you need to lock down, how quickly can it happen? You have 2 doors, but I'll still ask you, how quickly can those 2 doors be locked? Does anyone know? You have 3. Do you keep that one unlocked?
That one's locked.
That one's locked, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
During Sunday school? Okay. So right now, normal practice on Sunday is these 2 doors are open, correct? Okay, so let me just ask you, you suddenly get information that Windsor deputy flies by, I've got someone with a gun out here, and they say, get this building secure. How quickly can you lock those 2 doors? And how? You guys, this is where you answer me. Southland's Devil. Hex key, all right, okay. So the deadbolt I like, because I always think of 5 motor skills. Like if we're going to a call and it's pretty right here, I would have a tough time turning like my radio, because your 5 motor skills go. So I love the deadbolt. I challenge any of you, you get that information to get a hex key, go down there and quickly lock that door. It's gonna be really hard. So these are things to take into consideration. How quickly can you lock it down, and then the access. So trend that we're seeing a lot of people meet in the middle is they'll leave possibly 2 doors open. Once the service starts, both those doors are locked. Ushers or greeters stay mobile, because you also have people facing this way. So then you have people back there, we call them the sheep dogs, protecting the sheep from the wolf. They're just the eyes and ears watching. And then when my family, because my husband's always late, when we show up late for service, that usher's there and they can let them in, or they can assess it. If it's something that they don't feel comfortable with, that's where you have those conversations. But if it's delayed, then it buys you time. Good example, schools used to be the #1 place, as you know, being a teacher, where these took place. What's different about the schools now versus when we all grew up? Like what's different with the structure of the schools and the access? You have to go through a double vestibule. You have to go through a lot of steps to get in. So they've hardened it, and now a lot of these threats are going to easier, softer targets. All right, I threw a lot of that in there because this is just, I know something that's putting a lot of questions up. So during like Monday through Friday, how many people are
through Thursday, and it could be 3 to 5.
Okay. So during those days, can anyone come in or is it secure?
It's usually secure.
Okay, good. We're definitely seeing trends to that. And a lot of them are getting what you had. If someone's here, we had a call last week, someone was having a mental health crisis and it actually required quite a police response, but they went to their church and they were having this and luckily they were able to keep the threat outside and maintain it, keeping them out there. All right, we talked about this. Maps. Do you have maps pretty much throughout the building? Like if I were to run downstairs, would I have an idea where exits are? It's recommended for people if they just take up running and then now they get to a room downstairs and they're like, oh, there is an exit right here. If you think of what's in the back of a hotel door, a map, because not everyone knows their way around. Highly recommended to have maps. Directional signage is good. This is a smaller building, so it's pretty easy to find what you need, but some of these larger buildings, you have no clue what's on the east side versus the west side. Door numbering. So we decided you have 3 exterior doors, is that correct? Okay. Again, this is smaller, but it might be, let's say we have a medical emergency right down bottom of the stairs and you're calling 911, you can say, have the rig come by door 1 versus come to door 3, which is back here. It's just quicker. Plus, in an active threat response, they can say, I see the threat, it's over by door 3. It helps us get to where we need to get. When you do the door numbering, and we can send you an example, it should be on the outside of the door and also on the inside of that exterior door. So you're calling 911, you can say, we have someone, they fainted, they're by door 1, and you can see what that is. Do you have first aid kits, AEDs, defibrillators? So I told you to run and get one right now, where is it?
AED is right here.
Okay, right there, and look at the sign, A plus, A plus plus. First aid kits? Yeah, you don't know, okay. Stop and bleed kits? Throwing a lot at you guys, I warned you, okay. We are seeing a lot of churches, I love that you have an AED here, first of all, thank you. But first aid kits and then stop and bleed kits have really, are really pretty popular now in churches. It could be someone falls pretty significant out in the parking lot, gets hit by a car, you can bleed out in as little as 3 minutes. So we're working on getting more stop and bleed kits. We offer a stop and bleed training too that's free. We just did one at a school today, we trained 100 teachers. Because I will tell you, our schools now all have mass casualty kits at them, with tourniquets and gauze. We just need people to know how to use them.
The other thing, and this kind of aside to this, we're seeing a lot of people including Narcan
Yep.
in their kits. Because, again, you just never know who's going to be coming, who's going to be showing up, what kind of shape they're going to be in. So it's something that's really easy to administer. It's pretty much idiot-proof, I'll say. You can do no harm with it. So even if a person didn't go unconscious because of an overdose, if you give them Narcan, it's not going to do any harm. So it's a big deal.
Yeah, and Dane County Emergency Management has a program, they're called OAK boxes, OAK,
Something like that.
opioid, yeah, they're free. Because people unfortunately are overdosing in parking lots or coming to churches to get assistance and just having that.
Who does that?
Dane County Emergency Management. Her name's Kaylee Peterson. We can send you, if you remind us, we can send you the link to connect with her. We're getting them in more, seeing them in more libraries and just public places. So I went through that quick. I just want to kind of put that out there for you to think about.
All right, so again, talking about access, we're going to show you a very quick, short video, and I'll kind of explain it. This is from the Covenant School shooting that happened in Nashville a handful of years ago.
That was it.
Well, that one.
Showing the terrifying moments the shooter blasted their way
aid or special ed aid or something like that. The reason that person volunteered is because they were actually gathering intelligence, drew a map of the floor plan, probably noted what the schedules were, different things like that that would help them be successful. And so when that person went to school, when they were younger, they did not lock the doors. However, when that person returned years later, they had had a shift, and so they actually locked the door. But you saw what happened. They simply took the gun that they had and shot through it. Now, glass is always a concern. However, it is a little bit of a delay because that still needed to be breached. So when that person fires through that, it creates a lot of noise, gunfire, glass breaking, things like that. So it still gives you a second or two of notification. But what we're seeing in order to keep that from happening or delaying their ability to get in, something called ballistic film, security film, riot film, downtown Madison, up and down State Street. A lot of those businesses, after the years, those are really good paid years for me, spent a lot of time during Halloween on State Street. And because of so much damage, a lot of those places invested in this, right, to plan for something later down the road. It is a clear film that you can apply to glass. We've had companies tell us that after work, they had a company come in, apply it, people showed up the next day, had no idea it was there. That's how transparent it is. It can significantly delay to the point where a person is not successful because they can't get in. So that's the purpose of that.
And you'll be on my church, I keep like a list of my church contacts. We host a Protecting Places of Worship. This will be the second year I've been involved in it, in May. And I'm working with WAM, Wisconsin Emergency Management, and when grants come out for churches to get things like this, I'm going to be pushing it out. So, because money is always an issue in how you do these upgrades, so as soon as I find out about it, it's coming out, so be prepared. With high urgency exclamation marks.
If you need to get a restraining order against her, just let me know. I'll walk you through the process. Some of the other things we're seeing. So this is from inside a business. It's had a lot of glass. So visual stuff is really important. You want to deny or delay physical access, but also you don't want to be seen, right? So they applied certain things to glass on the inside. This is just simply frosted, fogged out. If you turn the lights off back behind this and stay away from that door, you can't see anything. And that's really, really important. Mirror or like two-way mirror type of things where you have full visibility looking out, but if you're on the outside trying to look in, you can't see a thing. That buys people time. It gives them that advantage. They can maybe see something coming before it gets there. Decals. This is from a business. So, like the buses, you've seen things like that on buses, right? Again, if you're on the other side of that, full view, no problem, but you can't see them.
So I talked about outdoor events. Bollards are extremely common. So fixed bollards such as that where it's there, it's not moving. Removable bollards are becoming more common, especially like our school sporting events where they can actually just put this up and then they can take it down. If you've been to a parade in the last 3 years, July 4th, have you seen a snowplow or a salt truck? Probably, because we're using them as bollards to protect vehicles from getting into that area. So think of it, if you're doing an event here, if there's a way you can strategically park cars so that people are on the inside and another vehicle can't ram into that crowd. If you have crowds gathered in, a lot of the trunk or treats that occurred in obviously October, we talked that through with them, is that having that set up so that if a vehicle were to come down that road, and it could even be a medical emergency. We get a lot of medical emergencies where vehicles will go into a crowd. Having the cars lined up so that those cars would stop it. Collapsible bollards, seeing more of these. Again, more protection should be locking, and the locking mechanism is not working, please make sure you're addressing that. We actually were at a church a week and a half ago, and I went into a large area, and they had these nice locks on it. I thought, you could get like 50 people in here, this is great. Locks didn't work. And he said, yeah, those don't work. And I said, but if I were here and I went in there and I saw that, I would think I was safe, and now you're stuck. So make sure if things are not working, it's addressed.
There was a school attack in 1988 in Stockton, California. And I just heard young man, everybody's young to me at this point in my life, but young man, he's probably in his 30s or 40s now. He was a kid that went to that school, so he lived through that. So that attack happened in January of 1989. And one way that that attacker gained access to get where he wanted to be is he went through a gate that was attached to some iron fencing that went around the school. The lock either didn't exist or was broken, I don't remember which. So the day after that attack occurred, people showed up to install the lock. They found a handwritten note on it that said, ordered November 1988. Got here January 1989. Needed yesterday. So to me, that really stuck with me because they knew it needed attention, but it just kind of got put on the back burner, right? I don't know if that would have made a difference, but it could have. So again, just really paying attention to those details and making sure it gets done as quick as possible.
So I know you have the Ring doorbell. Do you have any other camera surveillance on site? Okay. Know your congregation. I love this. Years ago, we did a training down just outside of Oregon, Wisconsin. The church shared with us that once a year they do a safety Sunday. Not to scare people, they just do it annually. And they talk about, let's take a walk. Here would be the exits. If you can't get out of the building and there's something going on, here's safer areas. Here's if there's a tornado warning, where to go to. If you have to evacuate, take off running, and it's -80 like it was last week. Here are areas that you can run to. They just talk it through, and then they also find out who's in their congregation. And some churches don't want it to be a conversation with everyone. They can just say, you know, if you're military, law enforcement, if you're a nurse, if you're a doctor, EMT, medic. It's just good to know who you have here on Sundays if something were to happen. So I think that's genius. I think it's great. All right, so here's all the links that we're going to be sending you, so be prepared. Don't reinvent the wheel. And I don't know what your insurance is recommending, but a lot of places now are developing emergency operation plans if there were to be an active threat, active shooter. So don't reinvent the wheel. It's already out there. You can just kind of plug things in. A trend that we're seeing, it's really been a shift the last couple of years, is a lot of churches now have safety teams or security teams. Basically, some of the safety teams, they just make sure that they're CPR trained, or they have a little bit more advanced skills, or they have an interest in the safety of the church, kind of checking doors or doing things. So we'll send you that too.
How many of you have heard this? Power pillow. So what this means is when you have people come into your space, you've got ushers, you've got greeters, right? So if I were to show up at this church, never been here before, I'm looking for a place to call home, right? So I come in and somebody right away greets me and says, hi, my name is Cindy, what's yours? Nancy. Nice to meet you, Nancy. You don't look familiar to me. I don't know if you've been here before, but we welcome you. We hope you come back. We hope you can call us home. Okay? How does that make you feel? Involved and cared about. Involved, cared about. Right? However, there's another side to this. People who want to commit crimes or who want to commit crimes don't want to be noticed. They want to fly under the radar. They don't want to draw attention to themselves. So when you have somebody showing up at a particular location doing surveillance to see, hey, I wonder what it would be like to go here. sends the message that, hey, people are paying attention here. They're paying attention, they're engaged with you, they greet you, so this might not be a place I want to come, right? So the power of hello is very powerful, but it can also help people when they're really pushing back on locking doors because they want this to be a welcome space. You can make it a welcome space still, right? Even if the doors are secure. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and we'll talk about say something, but a lot of these assailants do counter surveillance and they do dry runs. So to go somewhere and suddenly they're greeted by 5 people, that could be a deterrent. All right, communication. And I'll just use Windsor. Do you communicate or have a way to communicate with other churches in this area?
I think the secretaries, right?
Secretaries, okay. I love this. When I worked patrol in Western Dane County, we had an individual that was going to churches and was pretty agitated, wanting hotel vouchers and money, and it actually was concerning for a lot of the ladies that were there during the week. So we kind of connected them all, so they were communicating. Oh, she was here yesterday, enough that we knew that she had went to like 6 churches and we could actually do something about it. So I just think communicate. We don't talk. People go home, they shut their garage door, they don't talk anymore. Like communicate. If there's concerns, make sure you're sharing that. All right. How many levels do we have here? Is it just 2? 2 levels? Okay.
It's the third one, but
Third,
it's not.
sorry.
It is. There is a 3rd one.
Video, wire law.
Oh, okay, got it. So let's just say, I'll just give you a situation. You have an usher at door, let's call it door 1, and there is gunfire out on the road up there. So they come in and they're like, if the door's locked, which maybe you don't have them locked, how are you communicating to everyone in this building to tell them? Because I'm guessing up here, you'd probably hear the usher yelling, right? We have gunfire outside, keep somewhere safe. What about downstairs? Are they gonna hear you yelling? How are you communicating to them?
There shouldn't be people downstairs during service.
Okay. When would there ever be people downstairs?
They would Sunday mornings when they have Sunday school, but then up here is not quite as active.
Just a piece for you all to think about. And I don't know, and you need to be safe before you communicate, but especially if your kids are down there, you need to let those teachers know there's a threat outside, we need to get into a lockdown and keep these kids safe. We've seen some churches going to like walkie-talkies that are just for an emergency where usher wears it. Again, I think yelling here, but just keep in mind if something happens, know that you have those kiddos downstairs and they need time. These are life skills. You might be at your athletic club, you might be at a mall. How are you getting that information? So we're seeing a lot of PA systems being installed, especially our large venues. Like we work a lot of events at Alliant Energy Center and CrossFit. Some of them are outdoors. So how are we, if we have a gas leak suddenly, how are we alerting people outdoors? So just things to think about. I think here yelling would be you pretty much hear people, but letting them know what's going on. The Sikh temple shooting in Oak Creek, Wisconsin, you remember that? So these 2 kids that you see up here, at the time, they were actually 11 and 9. They were in the parking lot waiting. Their mom and dad had gone to the grocery store, so they were outside. That assailant actually pulled in the parking lot and he shot and killed someone in front of those 2 kids. Those kids ran inside that building yelling, "There is a man with a gun in the parking lot." And the feds gave these kids credit for saving lives. Because people ran out opposite doors and people barricaded in pantry areas. 2 kids, just simply, this is what's happening, when and where.
So the number of people barricaded at pantry was 15. The first person that suffered injuries was the first responding officer. He was shot 15 times. He survived. But the people inside that building, inside that pantry, are convinced that he took the bullet that was meant for each one of them. And that because he engaged that person outside, it bought people time inside and saved them. So it's just a little, So we know that messaging is important, getting information out is important. How are you gonna know what to do if you don't know what's happening? So in this day and age, different from a number of years ago, we want people using plain language. So these are all coded words, coded language that people have used in the past to say there's an active attack or active shooter or whatever on the property. The problem with that is that if I don't know, if I'm not familiar with your emergency operation procedures, I don't know what any of that means. And if Nancy is first time here at the church, and somebody says code brown, Nancy doesn't know anything, right? We have to be able to speak to the least common denominator, that person who has the least amount of knowledge. So instead of using all this coded stuff, just say what it is, just put it out there. I'm more concerned about what all of you know and the information you have than I am with this attacker. They already know where they are and know what they're doing, so I can care less about that.
We often get questions, if there is a threat in this area, how am I getting that information? Back in the day, we used to be able to reverse 911. People don't have landlines anymore. Am I correct? A lot of people don't have landlines. So reverse 911 is going nowhere. We're very fortunate now in Dane County in this, probably, was it 2 years ago? I'm trying to remember when the gas leak was. Probably just over a year
Yeah,
ago.
it's over a year. For sure.
In Dane County, our Dane County Emergency Management, along with our dispatch working together, they can do something called a wireless emergency alert. So the very first one they did, we had a gas leak in Marshall, and the way the wind was blowing, we had a certain area that we needed evacuated quick. They basically were able to circle it, ping every cell phone that is in there, and you get an alert that's like an Amber Alert. We use this for our incident we had at Mount Forum, one of our schools. Unfortunately, that kid that attempted to gain access lost his life that day. He came to school with a pellet gun and tried to gain access, and then we used it for lemon light for people that were in that area. So it's called a wireless emergency alert. You don't need to sign up for it. Basically, if your cell phone pings in a certain area, you will get it, just like an Amber Alert. I like to just say local government, you're with Windsor, so it'd be sheriff's office, but like Sun Prairie has Nixle, Middleton has Nixle. Where you live, where you work, find out what kind of emergency notifications your local police department has. It's good to get that quick, because they just send you a text really quick.
All right, so how many of you remember the term going postal,
Oh, yeah.
right? So if
We've
you
moved
go-
to places where kids look at us and like, I've never heard of that.
Yeah. So that was something that was used how many years ago? Decades, actually, even. And it started with somebody working at the post office, showed up at work and just started shooting people, right? I think a lot of times that's the idea folks have. Somebody goes to bed one night, they get up the next morning, they're mad, they're tired, they're not doing that great, and I just decided today I'm gonna go out and just shoot a bunch of people. That's not how these folks work. I talked about the individual with the Covenant school shooting. So after that event, when they were doing the investigation and trying to put all the pieces together, they actually found journal and diary and writings that this individual had been keeping over about 10 years. They found out that that person was obsessed with this stuff for a decade. The last 2 years of that 10-year period accelerated. So this wasn't an overnight thing. People plan, they test the waters, they do dry runs, they do surveillance, they do all this stuff ahead of the actual attack. And so what typically happens is these individuals usually start out having some sort of complaint or grievance. Something's gone wrong. Maybe they feel like they're being bullied or whatever. And they try to get some help, or they go to somebody, they talk about it, and they feel like they're being blown off or just not handled properly. And so the next step in this continuum, this pathway to violence, is now they start thinking about violence. They start thinking about getting revenge, things like that. And so this is a continuum that goes up, it continues to go up if there's no intervention. But the good thing about it is that we can bring people back down. But in order to do that, we have to be paying attention. We have to recognize the signs. We have to recognize when people are starting to display concerning behavior, or they're talking, or they're putting videos up, or whatever. So just know that if you have people close to you in your life, or coworkers, or kids, or whatever it is, and you start to see some stuff that's kind of concerning and red flags are going up, that is an opportunity to intervene. Because if we don't, and that person has the mindset, we will eventually get to an attack. So just paying attention, reaching out to each other, having that human connection. Hey, I noticed, I feel like maybe you're struggling a little bit, and I'm here for you. Whatever something I can do for you, right? That kind of thing.
So, we're all adults here, I'm just gonna be blunt. I hope you all know in this day and age, you should take every threat seriously. I can't tell you over the years how many times I've gotten a call 3 weeks later where someone says, I saw a video that my kid shared with me from 3 weeks ago, so-and-so had a gun, they were gonna bring it to school. Why on earth are you calling us 3 weeks later? So I can't stress that enough. If someone makes a threat, against your church or against maybe where you work, please report these things. PTAM is Behavior Threat Assessment Management. Our schools are doing a great job working that, and we're working with this. I'm giving you a lot of acronyms. WISIC, it's like our State Intelligence Center. It's amazing when one person says, I think it's water. We saw these signs, we saw these red flags. And then now you're having other people coming in saying, yeah, they're blowing up rabbits in their backyard, I just thought it was weird. That is weird. That is strange. You need to report that. Let us get involved. And maybe it turns out to be nothing, but I would hate for the one time you didn't report or something. Cindy and I both worked in community policing for many years, so we're really big on resources. No one calls 911 because they're having a good day. So oftentimes, we go to people's homes, and it's nice to leave them with something. So I can't stress 2 of these enough. I think they should be hanging in bathrooms, hanging in kitchens, hanging in break rooms, domestic abuse intervention services in Madison, and the 988 suicide and crisis lifeline. I will tell you, I can only speak for Dane County, but I know our suicide rates are up post-pandemic. People are really struggling. We just need people to know there's resources out there. So just that reminder that crisis lifeline is there could really help save a life. Let's skip that one. Okay. Actually, I'm gonna go back. So you'll wait. So a lot of do you get people that come here just wanting resources? Like, where do I go for AODA, mental health? I need hotel vouchers. So this past Protecting Places of Worship seminar we worked with our Behavioral Health Resource Center, and they have sheets now that just have all the different resources. That if someone comes here, you're at least giving them something to leave with and telling them to leave. They're much happier with you because they're leaving with something. So I just think it's good to have things on hand to help them in their crisis. All right, what do you guys see here? Now you can tell if you're really paying attention or if you're just nodding your head. Shark. That is a shark. This is why you don't scuba dive or go in the ocean. Situational awareness. So I line of defense, because it tells you what's happening. Easy way.
So I hope that this is not new to anybody in here. See something, say something. It's been around for a number of years now. You see those reminders, those posters, the electronic board, messaging boards, things like that, all over the place that will have this information up there. So what this means for you is that if you see something, if you read something, if you listen to something, if you watch a video, how many of you are on social media? Who's not on social media? Thank you. We can all hang out together, right? I hate it. There's good things about it, but within the last couple of years, it's the devil's playground, and I hate it. So many people feel empowered to sit behind a keyboard and put anything out there that they want without due regard, without even thinking about any consequences, because they can be somewhat anonymous. However, there is a lot of information on those sites. So if you're in those sites and you're starting to see videos people put up talking about this kind of stuff, or maybe messaging or writings or something like that, that's information that's very key that we could use. The bar for law enforcement in particular to get involved and to intervene in somebody's personal business is a high bar to meet. And if we don't have documentation, if we don't have information that we can point to and say, hey, this is why we want to do what we want to do, then we can't. And so when you get this stuff, reporting it, saying, hey, I don't know what's going on, but this is something I saw or something I read. It could be somebody just trying to instill fear in folks, but it could also be something like this. So when you see something, say something, but do something. Like Jocelyn said, 3 weeks later, that's not appropriate, right? So she'll give you some ways that you can report stuff, but there's so many of these instances where through interviews, through criminal investigation process, people will come forward and say, hey, I had this information, for example, Virginia Tech. So when that attack happened on that campus, it occurred in a building called Norris Hall on the 2nd floor. So that attacker actually chained the doors to that building. It kept people from being able to get out, but also really delayed us being able to get in. A lady, after the attack, was being interviewed, said, I saw a person meeting the description of that individual 2 weeks ago, chained the doors. Now, you all seem pretty reasonable. If you saw somebody chain the doors to this building, would you report it? Because that was a dry run. And nobody came forward with it, talking about it. So,
We recently had a building in Dane County, that an individual came in and was taking pictures of all the cameras inside. Would you consider that a red flag? Yeah. Why are you doing that? And I'll ask, I'm just gonna go off of body language. You two are here during the week. Just keep looking at each other when I ask questions. Okay. See, I'm a good observer. Okay. So has this ever happened during the week where you're here afternoon and there's just a car parked in the parking lot for a long time? What do you do? How do you address it? What do you keep an eye on it? Okay. I will let you know because Windsor is our partners. You can call the non-emergency number call, text, email, there's an online PDF, go to their website, and again, you can be anonymous. I say confidential because I don't even know how to best describe this. If it's something that's actively, like, we get a lot of tips, this kid's suicidal. They're actively suicidal, we may have to pull that web address to find out who's reporting this. But for the most part, you're confidential. When the Office of School Safety receives this, it could be a picture that you upload. We get a lot of videos uploaded because Snapchat is, wish it would just go away. When that tip is received, it immediately goes to the local law enforcement and the local school district. Immediately. So now they have that information and they step in and intervene. Who is this kid, or where did this, we've had some threats come in to some different schools around the county. We immediately get involved. It could be 2 a.m., it doesn't matter. But it's an avenue, because our kids hear and see a lot. They're scared to report it because they don't want to be that kid. So now these kids can just upload that and their name's not attached. So we just need people to know about it, we need parents to know about it. Also, people ask, are there tip lines? The sheriff's office in Madison, we use Madison Area Crime Stoppers, and you can be anonymous. And we get some great tips. I'm not kidding about the kid that blows up animals in the backyard. That's a tip. That's strange. It's odd behavior. What other kinds of things have we dealt with?
I was just gonna say that there's been over 11,000 tips that have come through that platform. And she and I know, which you don't know, that there were at least a couple, if not 3 or 4, attacks that never happened because somebody reported it and we were able to head that off. But you don't know about it because it didn't happen. So it's a really, really, really effective platform to be able to get this information.
Yeah, and it can be a threat to a student, threat to a staff member, threat to the school. We get a lot of bullying. I don't get the lower level ones, I get more the imminent ones because I'm on the distribution list, but vaping, they're getting vaping tips now through that. That's what the school gets, but we get anything that's imminent.
All right, so map of the United States for a 24-year period, so 2000 to 2024. We don't have the 2025 data yet. If you know anything about statistics, there's usually a delay in getting a full set of that out. But under the definition that I just talked about a little bit ago, in our country, we have had about 596 of these attacks occur. So depending on where you go for your information, you can get a few numbers, you can get thousands, but we have a very narrow, specific definition that we use. But I'm going to draw your attention up to Wisconsin. All of those colored circle dots indicate an attack. And if you look at this area right here,
It might be hard to see.
it's a lot.
So just for time, going off that definition, you can look up mass murders and the numbers are totally different than what we're providing. We use all, again, active attack data. So just to pull a couple, that Wisconsin, 2005, Sheraton Hotel in Brookfield. Does anyone remember what was taking place at that hotel that day? It was a church service. 2012, the Azana Spa shooting. 2017, the Rothschild Bank shooting. Does anyone know what those two had in common? Domestic related. That attacker came to that location because that other half of that person was there. Especially when we're working with workplaces, we say if you're going through something at home, you're being stalked, you're getting threats from an ex or current husband, wife, make sure you're letting someone know why is that other half coming here. I actually flew into Texas the day of the Sutherland Spring He actually met a security guard, and I'm just gonna point to your parking lot. He actually met a security guard in the parking lot, and that security guard was eating a hot dog and said, why are you guys here? Why are the cops here? Communication. Granted, that is a very large campus. Did people in other buildings or other floors of that building know that the shooting was occurring? How can you safely push out emergency mass communication information? And I hate that we had to add Abundant Life on here. And I will tell you, we carry a lot of weight going out in the community and do these trainings. I want to know you're safe. I know that I'm running into the fire while you're running out. And Abundant Life that day, that started in that classroom. So we'll harden these buildings as best we can. We still got to teach you, if that were to start in here, what are you going to do?
Josh mentioned this, we get our information, pretty much all of it, from the Alert Center, Texas State University down in San Marcos, Texas. This is the only reason for their existence. This is all they do. So if you're just wondering about frequency and how that looks over that 24-year period, you can see how it's kind of up and down, but generally speaking, it's continued to go up. 2021 so far has been the worst on record. So what do we know about the attacker themselves? Not a lot, but there's two things. One, Caucasian male. Two, we used to say in the middle years, we've seen a shift downward for the age group. So early mid-20s, Caucasian male most often is the perpetrator. Handgun still the most common, even including all those other types of weapons. So this is interesting. Overall, so if you add up everything over 24 years, businesses now are at the top of the list in terms of the most common environment. Schools, when we first started doing this, schools were up here. It really kind of dropped down. However, what I will say, over the last 2 years, we've seen what I consider to be a little bit of a disturbing trend, and that is outdoor spaces. So for the last 2 years of information that we have, that has risen to the top of that list. It's still a little bit early to tell if this is something we're going to continue to see or if it was kind of an anomaly kind of thing, but we are seeing that. All right, so as we get into kind of the meat and potatoes of this, I want you to keep two things in mind that speaks to your survivability and your safety. First thing is time. Everybody, when this happened, everybody involved, regardless of what your part is, we're all racing the clock. The attacker knows that once they pull that trigger the first time or hit the car, the whatever, the first time, whatever type of platform they're using, they know that people are calling 911. So they're racing the clock. They have to move quickly with purpose to do what they need to do. First responders, we know what's at stake. So we're racing the clock trying to get there. People on scene, you're waiting for us. So you're looking at that clock. People that have been injured, racing the clock because they need medical attention. So time is really, really important. The second thing is distance. So in order to perpetrate injury or death, I need to have some proximity to you, right? So I have to be able to access you. So we need to delay or deny access. We'll talk about response times and duration here in a second. But you need to be able to keep that person from getting to you until we can get on scene. So distance is important. What are we talking about with time? So on average in our country, from start to finish, the duration of these events is somewhere between 4 and 8 minutes. Everything that we've seen over the last handful of years has fallen within that time frame. Now, it's not an accident that we started keeping track of this in 2000. So I'm going to throw a date out, 4/20 of 99. What does that mark? Columbine. Okay? We did things drastically different in that So we trained and responded in a way that when the first officers got on scene, the job was to set up a perimeter around that entire area. And we basically, I'll be honest, basically stood around and waited for our attack and response teams to show up. That takes a lot of time. That event from start to finish lasted 49 minutes. People inside that building should be around to talk about it today that simply bled out waiting on help. And so we don't do that anymore. We have what we call a single officer response, so that if Jocelyn's driving by a location, call comes out, we have an attack occurring, she's going, she's right there. She's not gonna wait for that next person to arrive. Her job then is to move in and find that attacker. Because we know what's at stake. How long does it take us to get on scene? Again, on average in our country, somewhere between 3 and 6 minutes. Again, over the last few years, the time frames have fallen within that. I will tell you that I think in one in particular, I believe it was called the Washington Gazette or something, it was a paper, a newspaper, and there was an attack that occurred there. Response time from the cops was about 30 seconds. I mean, just like that. When they got on scene, there were still people that were injured and still people that had died. So, regardless of the time that we're talking about, truly, the better question is, what are you doing in those moments? Because if we get here in 3 minutes, or we get here in 30 seconds, what are you doing in order to make sure you survive? That's a really hard question. A lot of people are stumped from the get-go. Well, I don't know what to do. I don't even know how to start this, right? So what we talk about is something called mental scripting. If this, then that. I'm on my way to church Sunday morning, and I'm having a conversation with myself, or maybe with my family. And I say, okay, we get there and X is happening, what are our options? Right? What could we do? How do we bring resolution? How do we survive? And so we run through those scenarios when nothing's happening. There's no immediate urgency about it, but we're preparing ourselves mentally. The body can't go where the mind hasn't been. If your brain isn't prepared, then it has no idea what kind of message to send to your body. And so we have, generally speaking, 2 responses to stressful events. One is fight, one is flight. But there's a third one, freeze. People who freeze up have never, ever, ever allowed themselves to think about this. So we start with the mental preparation, right? Having conversations between each other, thinking about it in our own head, doing what we need to do so that our mind is in the right place. Calling 911 obviously is really important, but before we even get to that, your body has a physical response to stress. And what that looks like is everything accelerates. Your respiration, your heart rate, all those things accelerate. And so if you don't return oxygen to your brain, you run out of oxygen, then you can't talk. Maybe we, start becoming delusional or whatever. We can't process information, that's a problem. So when things like this start, and you can use this for anything at all, deep breathing, yoga breathing, tactical breathing, I don't care what you call it, you take in a deep breath through your nose, you hold it for a few seconds, out through your mouth. That will help bring down your bodily functions, which is important.
Have any of you ever had to call 911? Stressful? Pretty easy? Stressful? Yeah. I had to call 911 and I was stressed. So I'm going to play, I talked about the mental scripting. We had an active shooter in 2018, September 9th, 2018, at a business called WTS Paradigm in Middleton, right next to Greenway Station. Mid-morning, it was an employee in good standing with the company. He stood up and just started shooting in the cubicle area. And we have permission to share this. This is a 911 call that was placed that day. We're just going to play a short clip of it there's some law that came out, like, for example, hotels, that 911 just overrides, even if you have to dial 8 or 9, I think it is. So once we test that out, it's good to label your phone on what to dial for 911, because I'm gonna be honest, a lot of kids don't know how to operate landlines. I have a junior in college that called it a pickup phone, said it's a phone, no, it's a pickup phone, it's a phone, like, how do you not know what a phone is? And I'm just, this is our world now, these kids don't know how to operate that stuff. Do you have panic buttons at all here? Okay. Again, I just want to share with you what we're seeing. We've been at quite a few churches that have placed panic buttons, like up underneath here or different areas. Problem with panic buttons are great, but a lot of panic buttons are going to go to a third-party alarm company who's then going to call 911. So there's still a delay. So I just like to mention that. Go ahead. Okay.
All right, so we include this because we tend to get this question a lot, weirdly. But just so you know how cell phones work, if you moved here from a different state, for example, people carry their numbers with them. We don't really change out the new numbers really at all anymore. So if I lived in Arizona, I have an Arizona area code. So I moved to Wisconsin. So the question presented to us is, all right, if I call 911 from my phone, which is the Arizona area code, does it go to Arizona? No. Cell phones work off of cell towers, so it draws from the closest or the tower that has the strongest signal. That is not going to be Arizona. So just so you know that, you don't have to worry about it.
Those of you that have grandkids, if you don't have a landline and they don't have a cell phone, but sometimes they may be there with you, make sure they know how to call 911 still from your cell phone. We've actually had medical emergencies where a grandparent was having a medical emergency, and luckily the kid knew the passcode to get into their phone. Most do because they play on your phones if you take them to dinner. But this is real issues now, is that if kids don't know how to get that passcode or they don't know how to do an emergency, holding the buttons down, how are they calling 911 if you're having a medical emergency? All right, I know you guys are gonna get a kick out of this. Does anybody have a phone like this still? I will give you $10. At your house?
No, I've got the push button.
Oh, cheating, no.
Yeah, I'm cheating.
Like the dial phones, okay. So I want to bring up something that really stuck with me after the Paradigm shooting. So just show of hands, how many of you remember your childhood telephone number? I mean, how do you ever forget that, right? So how many of you, if you were to call that number right now, you know the person that would answer at that number? Okay. So, I know I'm really making fun of cell phones a lot, but I think we rely on them too often. There was an individual, she was in her mid-60s, she was an employee at WTS Paradigm. The day of that shooting, she ran. She did what they're trained to do, she got away. Guess where she left her cell phone? At her desk. She got up and ran. Guess how many phone numbers she knew without touching a name or a face on her phone? Yeah, she actually knew two. She was pretty funny for a dark moment. She, mid-60s, knew her high school boyfriend's home phone number, and she knew her phone number. And unfortunately, no one was going to help us with this. But it actually really hit me because we had the media there, and now she can't get a hold of her husband and her adult kids to say, I'm alive, I'm over at DSW. So that, I'm making a point now, is my mission to make sure people know phone numbers, because in that moment of an emergency, that is a horrible feeling. I even asked her if anyone was ever arrested in her family. I'm like, I can look that up. Nope. Clean as fun.
All right, so location. Really important to know where you are to get to, right? So physical addresses, important. What is the address here?
4434 Second Street.
I should have taken you out.
Yeah. Cheater.
Right? Keep track of where you are, and know physical addresses, but more importantly, know other specifics, like what's the name of the place you're at. So we're at what church? She's holding her that takes a lot of time to get up to the 10th floor, right? So, specifics.
Just a trend we're seeing, definitely in schools, but a lot of churches that have numerous classrooms for kids. They have the classroom number 1, 2, 3 on the outside, and they also have it in the inside of the classroom. So I'm now a staff member, maybe I had someone run downstairs that was injured, and now they're in that room. I'm calling from inside the room, I can say, we're in room 1, 2, 3. Same doctor's office. Suddenly now you're barricaded in there because there's shooting occurring in that clinic. Where are you at? How do you describe that room? So we're seeing trends of labeling inside the rooms.
Carrie's Law,
Okay, so that's what I was looking for. Okay.
K-A-R-I. All right. When law enforcement gets on scene, just understand some of the things you might be encountering. This is really hard because, again, we know the seriousness, the nature of what we're coming to. So when we come, we're not even going to have handguns. We're going to have our rifles, our semi-automatic rifles out. And as we're approaching where we're going, they might be pointed in the direction that we're moving. If you're running out and you can get away and you encounter us, that may be the first thing that you see. It's hard because it's kind of the nature of the beast, right? We know that you've gone through this experience that just happened. You may have already looked down the barrel of a gun, and thankfully you're alive. But just prepare yourself mentally, that might be something you experience. There's going to be a lot of different looks in terms of uniform, color of uniform, departments. This is a picture from Las Vegas when they had the incident that happened October 2017. Jason Aldean concert across from Mandalay Bay, outdoor event, right? If you did run to get out and you meet us coming in, we want to see your hands up, palms facing out towards us, fingers spread apart. Makes it a lot easier for us to determine if you have anything in your hands and what it might be. There is no need to stop once you get to us. We just want you to keep going. You go as far as you want to go, as you need to go, until you feel safe. If you have information that you think might be useful, feel free to say, hey, last time I saw this person, here's where they were. This is what they looked like. Carry concealed, this is not what we're talking about tonight. However, we want you to understand something. If you own weapons and you have a carry concealed permit, or you open carry, which is legal in Wisconsin, a couple things. One is, please make sure that you are proficient with that weapon. Know how to operate, know how it functions, know how to reload, know how to clear malfunctions, be proficient enough that you know where your rounds are going. Because if, you have people armed here and they don't really know much about the gun, like my aunt, at one point had a hard conversation with her. If you go buy a gun and you just start wearing it, that's not enough, right? You have to understand it. But if you have a weapon with you and you're involved in something like this, it is a moral choice, it is a personal choice, that you have to decide in the moment whether or not you're going to do something to intervene. It's not your job and it's not an expectation. However, the people out there have done it. Please, please, please do not have that gun in your hand when we get there. It's a very dynamic, very chaotic situation. And if you're standing there with a gun in your hand and there's people on the floor around you, a bad day is going to get a lot worse real fast. Put it, reholster it, put it down, something, just don't have it in your hand. Hands up, communicate with the officer. This is my name, I have a weapon, this is where it is. Right, we'll work that out. All right, so, we don't want to give you a false sense of security. And so with that, we talk about response and how to survive these events by using the word minimize. Nothing in life is 100%. You can do everything absolutely 100% right, and things can still go wrong. So, we want you to survive, we want to give you what you need to increase your chance of surviving, but really what we're talking about is minimizing death and injury. We talked about the 30-second response. There were still people on site that aren't around today. So, I just want you to understand that's where we're coming from with this.
All right, so I'm just gonna touch on this quickly because we wanna get into the Ron Hyde fight, but, because there is an individual response. I have to give a huge shout out, and you're retired, DeForest Windsor School District, they are doing a great job in the schools. We work with a lot of school districts, and Cindy, you can type in too if you want. They're doing great. So I like to mention that because we're here in their turf. We work pretty closely with their school safety coordinator. I would like to say 98%, 99% of the schools in Dane County are now using something through their Love You Guys program called Standard Response Protocol. It's an all hazards approach, and we all understand the verbiage. So I'm gonna mention it, because you may have kids that are in a school, and we're starting to see this bleed over into what we call muni, municipal, and business. Here's a great example. For years, if we had someone with a gun in a business park, one business would call it, we're gonna go into a lockdown. One would call it, we're gonna go into a lockout. One would call it, we're gonna go to a lock-in. What the heck are you guys doing? So this is common verbiage. We have trained our dispatchers, our fire, our EMS, our law enforcement, in our schools. So for example, a hold would be called if there's like a kid's having a seizure in a hallway. We're gonna get on the radio and say, we're gonna hold, this is where the incident is, but we're gonna hold you in your classrooms. Class as usual, you're just clearing the hallways. It's not creating any drama, any trauma. A secure, we actually used this a couple weeks ago. We did a search warrant in Sun Prairie, and when we went to approach the building, they put the school in a secure. All that means is keep the kids inside. Business as usual, they can switch classes, do what they need to do, but no one is leaving that building because there could be a threat outside. And then we immediately communicate when it's done and it's lifted. A lockdown, that is, there is someone actively trying to get into the building or inside that building, trying to hurt people. That is locks, lights, out of sight, and that's where that Run, Hide, Fight portion comes in. And then obviously evacuate would be a gas leak or fire, and then a shelter would be a tornado. So you guys are still late. So it's just common verbiage, because I can't tell you for the 15 years working patrol, I'm like, they're in a lockout, locked in, like let's just all use the same words. So it's a great program. I just had to mention it. And again, DeForest, Windsor schools are using this. Prairie's using it. We're seeing it pretty much across the board.
All right, so understand that when we talk about this response, we want you to know that your tactics, whatever you choose to do, is intel-driven, which means you're responding based on the information you get, right? Your environment is going to dictate really what those tactics are. So based on where you are within a space, you're going to know what your options are, and then you have to decide that moment what's best for you, right? So we're going to talk about Run, Hide, Fight. This is the most common verbiage that we see in our area. Most people can understand it. What do you do if you personally catch on fire? Stop, drop, and roll. Everybody knows that. That's kind of like where Run, Hide, Fight is right now. The first thing that we want to ask you is, and I don't necessarily want an answer, but I want you to be thinking about this. We're in here, we're having a meeting, we start to hear what we think is gunfire. It sounds like it's inside the building, we're not quite sure where it is. We hear some screaming, we hear some other things that indicate to us something really bad is happening. What's your plan? Again, I go back to the body can't go where the mind hasn't been. You got to be thinking about this stuff, right? The first thing we're always going to suggest, if you can, get out, get out. I want to say that Run, Hide, Fight is not a linear process, so you don't have to start with A and go to B and go to C. You might be right to the fight from the get-go, right? But first consideration, if you can get out of here, get out of here. And to do that safely and quickly, you have to have an idea what your escape routes are. So you have 3 doors, so you need to be thinking about, okay, if I'm sitting here in the sanctuary don't want you stopping there, we want you to have a backup. We are creatures of habit. We like routine, we like things that make sense, we like patterns. Law enforcement trains for the worst case scenario, hoping we never have to use it, because in those moments, we default to what we train, what we know, what our routines are. That's the same thing for you. So if you're like most people, you go in the same door and you leave by the same door every single time. What do you do in that moment of crisis? You default to that door. We saw that in the Rural Colorado Theater shooting, interior security footage. We saw people going by clearly marked emergency exits. Where do you think they were going? They were going to the lobby, to the front door, because that's the only door they've ever come in and left by. So mix up your routine, develop some different muscle memory, right? When we say run, we mean exactly that. You're not going to run here, go to your car in the parking lot, and think you're going to drive anywhere. Remember I talked about explosives before. A lot of those have been found by vehicles. But also, some other things happen. This is a picture from a school attack that happened in Georgia. What do you see in the roadway? A lot of vehicles. Far as you can see up and around that bend, around that corner, vehicles everywhere, okay? This next picture, even worse. This is from Parkland, Florida, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. Holy cow. What's the problem with that? You can't get emergency vehicles in and out. Sandy Hook, they had to walk stretchers from a distance because they couldn't get the ambulances close enough to the building because there were too many cars in the way. Right? This picture, anybody want to guess where this is from?
Abundant Martin,
Yes, ma'am. What do you see in that roadway?
open.
We have worked so hard to make this happen. Dispatchers don't get enough credit because on that day, there was a dispatcher that every so often would get on the air and say, keep the roadway open. Just as a reminder. This was free flow. We could get emergency vehicles in and out, no problem. So the point being is that there's a lot of vehicle traffic. You're not going to be able to drive anywhere out here. Right? Don't forget about glass, windows, things like that. If you can't get to an actual door to get out, see if there's a window or some way like that that you can get out. Now, these windows I can see open. Great, if you could open it and go out, great. If you can't, you may have to think about how can I break it. If that's the case, just remember aim for the corners of that pane of glass. That's the weakest part of that glass. It's easier and quicker. I didn't say it was easy. I said it was easier than trying to hit it in the middle, right? If you're up higher, consider lowering yourself down as far as you can before you let go, just decreasing the distance you have to fall. Virginia Tech, second floor, one of the classrooms, 19 of those students who went out those windows, they were 19 feet 2 inches off the ground. That's a long drop, but they are all here to talk about it, right? Running is pretty simple. You just have to know where you are, orient yourself, understand your environment, your space, where your potential exits are, and then you just work from there. We tell people mix it up too. If you're in a larger area, if you're still working, but you're in a really large building, don't always do these scenarios from the same spot. We tell schools that. Don't always do it from the classroom, because you're not always in the classroom. We don't want to set you up for failure, right? So move it around. Next thing to consider is, okay, if I cannot get out safely, is there a place inside that I can get behind a door or hide or barricade or shelter in place? We talk about this two different ways. One is cover, one's concealment. Cover means protection. Is there brick? Is there concrete? Are there metal, steel, iron doors or something you can get behind? Engine blocks for vehicles, big huge tree trunks. Stuff like that's just going to stop or slow down around one fire. Right? Concealment means simply hiding. If I don't see you, I don't hear you, you don't exist, guess what? I'm moving on. So hiding can be very powerful if we do it the right way. What does the hide typically look like? Ideally, you want to find a space where we can cut off access, deny access, delay access. So behind a door, Locks are really, really important. We talk about this a lot because everywhere we go, there are spaces that have doors that don't have locks on them. In 24 years, there has never been an attack in a commercial setting indoor where an attacker breached a locked door. That is a long history of keeping track of this stuff. I'm not saying it can't happen, but it hasn't so far. All right, so I get into a room. If I can lock it, that might be all I have to do in terms of security. But once you get in, you buy yourself some time at the door. First thing we want you to do is, there another way out? Is there another door? Is there glass? Something like that, right? If there is, consider it. If you can take it, get out safely. If not, you're probably going to be in there for the entire event, right? So, other things we want you to be doing, silence your cell phones. People are going to be trying to get a hold of you. Your phones are going to be blowing up. You're going to get those alerts constantly. So you want to silence it so you don't draw attention to yourself. Lights out. We want it as dark as possible. I don't want to be able to look through glass or look through something and see you. Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, that attacker never actually got into the classroom. How he accessed some of those victims is, they forgot about the visual part of it, and he looked through the glass, and he could see people, and that's how he shot them. So we don't want you visible. So I get in, secure the door, turn the lights off, silence my cell phones. Next thing, we want you on the floor. I don't want you sitting in a chair. I don't want you sitting on top of a table, standing somewhere in front of the doorway. I want you on the floor. Why is that? This is a picture, and in between these two blue arrows, there are about three or four bullet holes. This is a picture from an attack that happened in Tulsa, Oklahoma at a hospital. So on that day, two folks ran into this, I think it's an exam room, as best as I can tell. Full disclosure, I don't know if this door was locked or not. But one of those individuals actually stood against this door, and my guess is he was probably shouldering it, trying to hold it closed. As that attacker went by, they shut through the door. He was killed on that day. So it's kind of an imaginary line. We want you below this line to reduce the risk of being hit. Generally speaking, carrying a firearm or positions of shooting about mid-torso, sometimes higher. So you're reducing that risk by being on the floor. We want people spread out. We don't want people all lumped together in one spot if you can help it. One thing that we talk about for probably the last year or so, something called hard corner or safe corners. So what this basically means is you have a room, you have a lot of glass here. So if you think about classrooms, most of them have glass in the door and or next to it. So we have somebody on the outside looking in, and they observe things for us. And so they'll say, okay, I can see everything from here over, but I can't see anything from here over this way. So we identify those areas by using like a visual cue. We used to talk about putting it at the top of the wall or on the ceiling, but apparently kids look down more than they look up. So we kind of shifted that thought and talked about putting it on the floor. So we draw that imaginary line, put the little color indicators there, and so everybody knows if I go across that, that's my safer spot. Right? Just minimizes that risk. In terms of visual access, so we talk a lot about using blinds, shades, fogging, like we talked about earlier, something like that to obscure the view. These are handmade shades. They're basically blackout material, homemade. This was a school. And so most 99.9% of the time it's in the up position, has a piece of Velcro. All you have to do is pull it, drops down. Really quick, really easy to do. All right, so what if the door doesn't lock? We have to talk about barricading because we do find these cases where this is the case. So, how can we barricade? Well, it depends on where you are, what you have. This picture is from a school. If you can see it, I know it might be a little small back there, but what don't you see in front of that door? You don't see people. The only critique I have with this is that I would want those kiddos on the floor, right? But no yourself up for that. So you don't want to be in front of the door. Now, that door is actually an outward opening door. People think, well, you can't barricade an outward opening door, that's ridiculous. You can, we'll talk about it. But let's say, even if I can get that door open, how long do you think it would take me to physically get my body through all that? Remember, 4 to 8 duration, 3 to 6 on scene, right? And what I can tell you by observing behavior from these security cameras and things like that, and what we know about previous attackers, is that they do not take the time to do that. They might stick a gun in there and pop a few rounds, right? But that's why we want you on the floor, out of view. So, when we talk about outward opening doors, there are a couple things you can do. What you see this individual doing right here, he actually took a cord, computer cord, electrical cord, something like that. He tied one end around this handle, using his weight and leverage off to the side. He's out of view, he's not in front of the door, holding that door. So then, the next step would be, other folks in that room are going to be barricading, putting as much in front of that as you can, right? That just makes it difficult, if not impossible, to get through. Crash bars, we see a lot of these all over the place. So again, know your environment, know what you're potentially going to deal with. This guy figured out there's a gap, so he tied a cord around the mechanism attached to the door, the other end around that desk. Door doesn't open. Double doors. What I found with double doors is that you can secure it, but you might be able to get it open a little bit, but I don't know anybody that's skinny. I don't know if you do, but I don't. I might be enough to get a hand with a gun through there, but I'm not physically going to gain access.
So Michaela's trying to get in.
Call that a chair king. I'm going to say this to you. Thank you for your service. Teachers did not sign up for this, but this is what they're doing. Really quick, really effective. Again, you have to practice, you have to get your hands dirty. This is another version of that chair cake. So you get a chair, you can wedge it in that door frame. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So again, you got to practice this at a time. This guy is actually using the door frame to help him hold that. These ladies, don't forget about your own bodies. Daycare, this is a great room for 4-year-olds during the day because those walls are made out of cinder block. A round is not going to penetrate that, however, there's no way to lock it. So this is what they came up with. I don't love it, but that's what they got to do, right?
All right, I want to get to these two things. Go ahead.
Okay, so this is from a church we actually just redid. We did it a number of years ago, came back this year. But they have these really nice, very similar to what you have back here. And so all they did, there's no way to lock it, but they actually made this. This is a piece of wood. Took measurements. And so if they have to secure these doors really quick, all they have to do is grab that and drop it behind. It's actually mounted by Velcro to kind of a podium.
It's kind of like right there, you know.
Yep, it's right next to those doors. Really quick, really fast.
So I want to ask you all, we're in here, if suddenly you have your doors locked, but now someone is trying to gain entry through that door on the south side, how are you securing these doors? How are you keeping people in here safer? Do you have a way to do that? Okay. So where up here is a safer place than where we are right here? On this level? Okay. I love that you have a side door there. I went and did a little tour of here. Your bathrooms don't lock, but there's a little cabinet there you can move. You can sit feet to back and keep those doors shut. And we just want you thinking, obviously, if you can get out and get away, that's amazing, that's great. But if someone's outside trying to get in and you can be safer in here and have those layers, we want you thinking. We've also seen churches that have added wooden, very narrow, thin wooden crosses on the wall. It looks beautiful, but for them, all they do is slide those pieces of wood through those doors and it's really difficult to open. Just slides right in those handles. Yet it doesn't cause anxiety or trauma because it's a cross. So just getting creative. And I know If that's what you gotta do to keep them out, that's what you gotta do. So just get creative. All right, this is called a night lock. We're seeing a lot of these.
How long did that take?
Seconds.
Yeah, it's quick, right? Anybody know why she put that tape over that? Yeah, motion light. We never thought about that. We saw her do that. This was actually a video that we shot because she wanted to show us. When we saw that, we're like, that's freaking genius, right? I mean, really. Motion sensor toilets. We found this out with a drill that we did with a really small school. So we were doing the height part of it with these kiddos, and a bunch of them ran to one bathroom off the gym, and like within about 10, 15 seconds, we started to hear, it's like,
And then the sink started running.
yeah, those things started running, yeah. So door closers, those mechanisms at the top of the door that assist with opening and closing, you can disable that, the door doesn't operate the way it's supposed to. Again, you gotta practice, this isn't something that's just automatic. You can use a belt, piece of clothing. This is actually a piece of a fire hose. Lady sent us that picture. They just slid it over. It was like a sleeve. Kept it closed. Again, not stopping there. We still want barricading behind that. So just so you know, these events, 48 minutes, 3 to 6 on scene, you're barricaded, you're hiding, you're waiting. And about 10 minutes out, we hear, knock, 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 Deputy Longley, let me in. What do you do? Well, that's the big $1 million question. We saw an interview with a teacher from Sandy Hook that died in Sawyer did after that event. She talked about this exact thing. Eventually, somebody came to the door, knocked, identified themselves as the police. She said, nope, not letting you in. If you are who you say you are, you will get in at some point, but I'm not opening that door. That is fine. But there's ways that you can assure yourself that we are that person. You're going to hear our radios. You're going to hear us talking. We can show you a badge. You can call actually 911 and say, hey, this person says they're at my door, this is where I'm at, can you verify that? They can do that. But we will eventually get in. This is a very controlled release. We're not going to just open the doors and everybody come running out. 2 reasons for that. One is that this now is a crime scene, so we don't want you running through potential evidence, especially if the attacker is still alive, because now it's going to be court, right? The other thing is you just went through this horrible event. You saw things you will never forget. You experienced things you will never forget. We don't want you walking out past people that are not here anymore. Now you have a visual that maybe it's your friend of 25 years or a family member. You're never going to get that image out of your head. And so we want to minimize that trauma that you could potentially be exposed to.
All right, I just skipped forward because I want to get through the fight and make sure we get you out of here at 10. That image to the right, that's a tourniquet. Law enforcement, we all carry tourniquets now. My go bag that I have with my rifle has 20 tourniquets in it, gauze. We carry that knowing if we come in here and now the shooting is still occurring downstairs and now I have people here that are injured, I'm throwing you tourniquet, I'm throwing you gauze, I'm throwing you tourniquet. I'm hoping you've taken a stop and bleed course and you know you have those skills. So just some pictures I threw in here. We're seeing more of these bleeding control kits mounted at airports. Most are schools, and I can say most in Dane County, we have mass trauma kits in them that have 10 stop the bleed kits and they hang in the hallway. Again, I pray we never have to unzip one of those, ever. And in the bottom right actually is a church. They had a bleeding control kit. Ushers knew where it was. They kept it back with their AEDs. So just know someone can bleed out in as little as 3 minutes. You have come across a car accident, what skills do you have? Sheriff's Office, we're offering, do we have a Windsor one, or did you just do the Windsor one?
I think they just did it not that long ago.
Okay. We're offering every month a free Stop the Bleed course. It's on the Sheriff's Office website, all around the county. So if you want to sign up, it's free, it's great. I'm just going to skip this for time.
All right, so we talked about the run, talked about the hide. What about the fight? So the intent of the fight isn't necessarily to injure or kill this person, although that could be the result. But what you're trying to do with the fight is you're trying to break their concentration thought, kind of throw them off their plan. And so the way that you do that is you flood their brain with a lot of stimuli, things that they're not going to expect. So first thing is, what can you get your hands on that you can pick up and actually use as a weapon or to throw at that person? They're pretty much anything is fair game. We get a lot of questions about, so you're telling me you want me to throw this at a person that's got an AR-15? That is what I'm telling you. Because in that moment, you're literally fighting for your life. You've got to do something. Time and time again, we have examples of people stepping up and getting involved in that fight that didn't have any kind of weapons at all, and they were successful. So you're flooding the brain. So I want to pick up, strike somebody with whatever I have, or throw things at them, and I want to do that fast and furious. I also don't want to be standing with my feet planted. I want to be moving as this is going on. Moving targets harder to hit than stationary target. So then the last thing is you're going to add noise, screaming, yelling, banging, something like that, so that what happens with your brain, it gets flooded with this stuff that you weren't expecting, and then your brain hits pause for a second, trying to figure out what's happening. When that occurs, hopefully you're situationally aware, you see sort of that break, that is your moment of opportunity. Next step might be
And
this.
if the gunman breaks through the door, fight back. Use anything you can get your hands on as a weapon, like a fire extinguisher.
Fire extinguishers make a great weapon.
Yeah.
Spray them and
You
then
don't necessarily have to be close enough to hit them either. You can just deploy it on them, right? So we call that swarming. If you have other people with you and now the fight's on, you've got people that will step up, who actually run towards that. Could he still or she still get a shot off or whatever? Yes. But again, go back to the minimize, right? We can intervene and minimize those numbers.
All right, we're gonna end this with a video, and I'm gonna make sure it's time for questions. This is called Tomorrow's News. It is a video from the Sandy Hook Promise. I will be honest, I have 2 kids of my own. They're both in college and are taking donations if anyone's giving them money. It took me a while to add this, not because it's graphic, just because it's hard to watch because it's the truth. So I want you as you watch this to remember 2 words: leakage and denial.
I'm here at the scene of tomorrow's shooting, where a 15-year-old will kill 4 children, 2 adults, and then turn the gun on himself.
When the shooting starts happening tomorrow, first I'll probably just think it's firecrackers or a car backfiring or something. He told some of us that his dad kept the gun in his closet and he always talked about using it on, the people that bully him. Tomorrow I'll probably say that I wish I told someone.
After the shooting, we're gonna feel pretty bad about picking on him, but until then, we'll probably just keep doing it because he's pretty weird.
Tomorrow I'll probably point out that something has seemed off with him since the beginning of the school year.
And I'm now joined by the officers who will be the first responders tomorrow. What additional details can you share with us?
Well, someone is expected to tell us after the shooting that the shooter has been posting on social media about doing this for weeks.
So how will you explain the shooting to your daughter?
Actually, I won't get to explain it to her because she won't make it.
This is Christine Lynn, reporting from the scene of another shooting. We'll say we never saw coming.
I feel like this is a huge barrier. You can live in denial. That's your choice. That doesn't change the facts. This is still a realistic thing that can happen. And so we need to get our heads out of the sand and in the game. I hope that nobody in here ever, ever, ever is faced with this. But I want you to be prepared in the event that you are. We have to do due diligence. We have to do what we can. So, again, I'm going to encourage you, once we leave here, this shouldn't be the end of it. I'll go a step or 2 further. If you want us to come back, we actually do what we call kind of walking tabletops, where we will come into a space and we'll say, the first question is, okay, is there a particular area that gives you a lot of heartburn? We'll go there and we'll walk through some of this with you, right? We'll kind of show you in real time what some of this actually looks like. So that is something that we can do, if you're interested.
Yeah, and I skipped the QR codes, we'll make sure we get you all that, but I wanna leave time for questions, we have like, it's 8 o'clock on the button. I wasn't kidding, this is 4 hours worth of content, it's hard to know what to not cover, because we wanna share this with you, and now we have this conversation. So any questions? Yes, sir.
I don't have a question necessarily, it's just that now since we've become a village, just a block away, we have our village police
Yep.
here, which is, I think, real advantage from what it was before.
Yep, and I don't know the relationship, if you had them here, we always say do coffee with a cop, get to know them. No one's gonna turn down coffee and donuts, right? But even tonight, I like to, I looked up where the Windsor deputy was, because I was thinking if he was there, I'd have him just walk over. And he was at C. Negre, that's, still, if there's a response, it's not right here. But I love knowing that you just have the PD right there. And I will tell you, I know all the deputies at Haley used to work over here. You have some really great deputies, and if you want them, they love looking for parking lots to do reports in. Maybe third shift sleeps, I don't know what they do, but, I can gladly let them know they're welcome to use your parking lot.
And by the way, it's called an
Thank
energy
you.
ring, not donuts. Can we all agree on that? Okay.
Yes, I agree, thank you. Yeah,
So if it's Sunday morning and Lori and I are getting communion ready and the kids are downstairs at Sunday school and all of a sudden you hear like shots or something, and we could call 911, do we run down there, do we run out the door?
What do you do?
That, no.
I mean, those are the kind of conversations to have internally. Because I can give you an answer right now, but in that moment, the answer I give you may not apply.
Yeah.
really important to include your staff that's with the kids in these conversations, because they're gonna be the ones that are going in action.
Because they're down there.
Yep.
with the kids.
And I can tell you, most churches we've been at, they say, I don't know how they're gonna communicate with us. How would we know if there's gunfire in this building, everyone's gonna hear it. But they have to have that information. And call 911 when it's safe. Obviously, I want you to do it as quick as possible, but I'm not gonna say, stop right here and just say, hold on, I'm gonna call 911. No, you get safe, get that call made.
Because, being a mother and grandmother,
Yeah.
go help those kids is,
Oh, yeah.
but is that,
That gives me heartburn, yeah. We just did a training at a hospital, we were at a senior care center, and a lot of those nurses said, I'm not leaving my patients. I don't care if I don't know my family. Others were like, I'm out. I mean, that is a personal choice. But yeah, if my kids were down there, I'm with you, I know what I'd be doing. So where the building hardening is really important too, and having ways that they can lock those doors downstairs.
So if we put an emergency management plan together, and would you review it?
We can, yes, peek at it is our way of getting around it. A lot of places call and they want us to sign off or do a formal assessment. But we also have a partner through Homeland Security that we can include in, who does more of a formal going through that with you guys.
And he might, I'm not sure, he might do that kind of thing, where he'll review stuff.
Yeah.
Give you feedback, but he's really good, and it's free. Can't beat that.
Yeah, we've had places that have emailed it to us once they're done, and it's more of just a conversation of, what have you done? It's hard when you work for a county government, you can't sign off and stuff, you can't get legal advice, so it's tough. But,
Our
yeah.
corp counsel and county attorney tells us all the time, don't say that, what are you doing? I have to defend you in court, you can't do that.
Yeah, but the developing EOPs, one of the handouts we'll send you, and our emergency management put one together to really just walk you guys through and make it easy. Because everyone's creating these. And I know like even with the four schools, your school safety coordinator, he's like, I'd be happy to come in and help them out. This is not new to them, they've been doing it. A lot of resources for you guys.
we have to be ready if you don't mind. Is that okay?
I'm
All
sorry.
right. Good and gracious God, we come grateful because we have been blessed by so much. But Lord, you have shown us tonight and over again in our news that we have people that put themselves in harm's way to keep us safe. And we are grateful. And we are asking a blessing of safety over our police and law enforcement of all kinds. We are grateful for our military and all who try and keep us safe. So Lord, we are asking a blessing over this church, over institutions, over everywhere. But most of all, we are asking for your help to be with persons who are disturbed to a point where this would be a consideration. And Lord, we just ask that we would be filled with love and help and be willing to listen to persons who are struggling with ill health and things in their lives that would cause them to think about these things. So more than anything, we're grateful. We're grateful for you, our Savior Jesus Christ, for your protection, which your Scripture shares over us. And we just hope that we can be open-minded and open-hearted and aware and wise and just act in a way that you would have us act and bring glory to you. And God's blessings over all who put themselves in harm's way. We ask it all with great appreciation and may the glory be to God. Amen. Thank you.
We bring you with us every day.
Yes.
That was beautiful, thank you. That was awesome. All right, thank you all, have a good night, stay warm. Summer is around the corner. Howard, good to see you again. I do. You're right on Viking Pass, are you? Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. I thought so. Yeah, I know right where you are. Yeah.
Male Caucasians?
Yeah, and we get that all directly right from FBS experience. So that would be a good document for us to get that,
So-
let's write it down.
So what I'm saying is that could we get the wrong impression that it's primarily white males that are causing this because they're white.
Windsor Police, they did a great job.
Yeah, yeah, we